I was wondering, what's your take on what is happening in the Middle East? We had all these changes. The government in
Mhm.
Syria fall,
Mhm.
just disintegration of Assad government. We had after that the conflict. The Gaza is continuing the same way. The genocide is going on and on, and you see something different from what we've seen so far. That is the attack on Qatar and
Mhm.
the summit after in the aftermath of the attack. All these countries coming together. You see Saudi Arabia getting closer to Pakistan, to Iran. They're not talking about Saudi Arabia and Iran. They're not talking about rapprochement, those sort of, let's put an end to the animosity, to the enmity. It's beyond
Mhm.
that, going forward, getting better. And Israel attacking Qatar, which is one of the most important countries for the United States in the region.
Mhm.
Donald Trump coming out saying that they're not going to do it again. And Netanyahu, hours after what Donald Trump said to the Emir of Qatar, he comes out and says, "It doesn't matter. We're going to attack you over and over, again and again, to get
Mhm.
what we want to get, to assassinate what we want to assassinate." Your take on what's going on in the Middle
Yeah.
East?
Um, this is probably the first kind of evident time that Israel has seen to be a liability for US policy in the region. Whereas historically, for decades now, they've relied upon the Israelis to act as a local cop and to smash down any signs of resistance. And more recently, actually under Trump version one, back in 2016 to 2020, he was attempting to get these Abraham Accords together to cement the role of Israel in the region. But the genocide in Gaza and, well, also the West Bank, one has to say, has been so completely outrageous and disgusting that even those who are basically Israeli supporters or Zionists are kind of questioning it. And it puts all of the regional Arab states in a really tricky situation because before they pretty much ignored the views of their local populations who were on the whole pro-Palestinian, and there'd be enough repression to prevent any opposition to that. But this has come at a very macro level, if you like. It's something where if any of these Arab states, who most of them, well, I think maybe all of them, but most of them at least, have got US military bases in them and technically relying upon, US defense, against what is a bit, you know, who are they defending again? Who's really going to attack them? Because Iran wasn't in the mode of attacking any of those countries anyway. So who is it who is going to attack them? And then it turns out, of course, that the country who attacks them is Israel. So, and then the Qatar uh, attack by Israel was most interesting because it's something that could not have been uh, left to one side by the local regional countries. That number one, there's military bases, US and British military bases in Qatar. Number two, they did nothing to stop the attacks. Number three, they actually helped the Israeli jets refuel to continue the attacks. So, if ever you want completely in black and white in big letters, these are not your friends. that would be that would be the evident thing. So I think that what it's done is led to a reassessment of what to do. I wouldn't bet on very much really happening in the next year or so, because these countries do depend upon or have depended upon so much upon US support that it's going to be difficult for them to extricate themselves from that. But example, fairly shocking when you look at it, the Pakistan, Saudi Arabia mutual defense deal, that really kind of came out of the blue. And it's something that is significant because you would have expected the US to have stymied that or turned it into something else, just some Islamic unity thing or something like that, not a mutual defense pact. Now, what the mutual defense pact would actually mean in practice, frankly, who knows? But the mere fact of it having happened greatly politically undermines the position of the US in the region, and will no doubt make other countries, whether it be the United Arab Emirates or any of the other countries, really think twice and, well, what are we doing? As I say, because the US is so entrenched in all of the countries, it'll take a while before very much can really happen. But it's a sign of an important crack in US hegemony in the region. And it's something really that's been, clearly led by the Israeli attack. And that just adds to, the anger that they've got over what's happening in Gaza. So it's something I think is very important for US foreign policy, and something really they probably can't do anything about. Because, as everybody knows, 3/4, 90%, whatever, of US congressmen and senators are, on the APAC payroll and generally pro-Zionist anyway, even if they're not on the payroll. And that conflicts a bit these days with popular opinion in the US. There's more people who are, questioning all this support for Israel, or at the very least thinking, isn't it a bit weird when you get senior senators standing up and saying the first thing to do is defend Israel and, having Israeli flags outside your office and all that kind of stuff. So it's something that you don't need to be pro-Palestinian even. You can just be a straightforward American nationalist, America first type person and think, what the hell is going on here? So all of this has opened up really quite an important set of factors that I think will cause big trouble for US policy in the region. I wouldn't go too far on that simply because, as I say, these countries are heavily entrenched into the US military and everything else. And it's only when we see more efforts, as has been made already, I think, by Pakistan, they get, some reports say about 80% of their weaponry they now get from China. And one or two other countries will be diversifying a bit anyway. So but we're seeing this kind of change, which if it starts impacting the Gulf countries, and probably at some point Egypt as well, then that would be a serious kind of political shift. It wouldn't of itself do that much about what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank. The slaughter continues, and the most you'll see, I think, is next week, is in the UN General Assembly. There'll be a vote on recognizing Palestine, and that's very likely to go ahead. But so far, as I say, that there's no real thing to stop what Israel is doing, namely genocide in Gaza, despite all of the opposition, despite UN commissions saying various things, and everyone else doing that as well. So unfortunately, I don't think it will change much on the ground, but it is a sign that the policy followed by the US is becoming more of an evident liability for them.
Tony, we had, in addition to what has happened in Qatar, before that, even we had the attack between the first time the two countries in the Middle East, Iran and Israel attacking each other. Israel attacked Iran and they wanted to do regime change in Iran.
Yeah.
And it was somehow a surprise attack on the part of Iranians because they didn't expect the attack coming while they were negotiating with the United States. Israel has decided, Donald Trump knew about it. They have tried to do everything to facilitate, to somehow trap Iranian in some sort of comfort that there would be no attack on them. That's why it was somehow in the initial hours, they were so successful in terms of putting pressure, a lot of pressure on the Iranian government. And many commanders were killed during the attack. Many civilians were killed. The official reports from Iran shows that 800, 900 civilians were killed. But after all, to put an end to the war, the United States has decided to interfere because they perceive that Israel is losing. That's why they have to interfere. What is Israel today, in your opinion, in the mind of, because before, just imagine what Israel was in the mind of the people in the Middle East. Israel was so much powerful militarily because they said that we have the technology, we have the weapon, we have the science, we have everything here at our disposal when we can use it against you. But you see the genocide in Gaza, you see the way they attack Yemen, they attack Iran, and I would argue they have been defeated in all of these fronts. Even in Gaza, they couldn't defeat Hamas. What is the outcome of what Israel has done so far to the mind of those people, in your opinion, in the Middle East, and how is it going to influence the region?
Well, I think it's on two levels really, because on a more popular level, I think people can see what you just said, that that Israel has not managed to defeat Hamas, it's not managed to stop Yemen, and and it's had all kinds of problems, and more news is coming out every week really about how much damage the Iranian attacks did, whereas previously it had been censored quite a lot, although a lot of people guess what really happened. So I think on a popular level, it's kind of made the whole idea of calling Israel an entity rather than a state, and a transitional kind of entity, a blot on the system, cancer in the region, that kind of thing. It's probably strengthened those ideas, but it hasn't really had that much effect, except this latest thing in Saudi Arabia with at a kind of more governmental ruling level, and that would take far longer, because I think those countries, they've stepped out of the Western orbit a little bit, by joining BRICS, for example, or maybe wanting to get involved in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, doing deals with China, or even the Saudis selling oil to China in renminbi, not in US dollars, that kind of thing. So there's a number of instances where these governments are already kind of stepping out of the Western bloc in order really to hedge their bets. You don't have to believe that they're underneath it all, they're good people or anything like that. They're just hedging their bets as a country, thinking, how do we gain economic, political security? And it's pretty clear that one side of the equation that we relied upon completely, namely the US and the Western bloc, is a real liability. They can't offer anything. And, they're promoting this destructive force of Israel on all of us. But I think what it will be, though, is you've got the two levels. You've got a popular level, which is, in any case, already was kind of, anti-Zionist, and now will be even more vehemently so. That in itself doesn't necessarily have that much effect upon government policies in the region, but just from a realpolitik point of view, the governments in the region will be looking to hedge their bets, and they better kind of step away from this, because the whole thing could crumble. And where are they going to stand? And in this, I think this partly explains Iran's response to the Israeli attacks. Back in, I think it was June, wasn't it? That I was annoyed and surprised that they stopped after the 10, 11 days or so, thinking that they could easily have finished this, really. And I don't know whether part of their calculation was not simply that if they went much further, were they being directly threatened by the US, for some big, massive military attack. That probably was the case. But they also probably didn't want to completely disrupt everything in the region, and hoping that they could, build up relations